What would the first chapters of Genesis look like on a fantasy world? Let's find out as we jump back into our Come World Build With Me series, where we are walking through the creation of the world of Petrus for my next Christian fantasy series. In our last two episodes, we talked about creating the history and the purpose of creating a Bible for this world and what that looks like. And then last time we talked about portraying God and Satan and demons in this world. But now that we've gotten all that out of the way, it's time to actually start out in Genesis, or whatever we're going to call the first book for this Bible. Let me know what you think. Currently, I'm just calling it the history of the first age of the world of Petrus, which is a bit of a mouthful compared to Genesis, which is a bit more snappy. So if you guys have any ideas of what we can call this first book in the Bible for the world of Petrus, then let me know in the comments. But anyways, so as I've started putting together some thoughts for what the first and second ages would look like in this world, with the first being basically creation to the fall, and then the second age being the fall to the crystalline fire, which is this world's version of Noah's flood. As I'm starting to put together my ideas for those two ages, one of the things I've been trying to figure out is exactly how much detail do I go into for the first age and how to portray that in an engaging way that sets up the entire rest of the history in the world. Because that's something that's so amazing about the beginning of Genesis, is that not only is it the beginning, but it also is paralleled in Revelation with looking forward in eternity to the end, with going back to the garden and the breaking of the curses and all of that. And that's what's so amazing about our God and about the Bible, is that everything is written with the end in mind, where God knows where the story is going, and there's so much rich complexity and parallels and pointing forward to, even in the very beginning of Genesis, that is reflected throughout the entire rest of the story, and ultimately in what the end of this present age for us is going to look like. And so I'm not God. I do not have that incredible of a mind and sovereign nature. And so I'm having to figure out, okay, what exactly should I set up in Genesis that is going to be reflected throughout the rest of the story and ultimately in the hope for eternity for this world? And so I'm trying to come up with all those details. Honestly, I'll probably have to retroactively add some of those ideas. God created with the end in mind. I'm having to come up with all of these details for the beginning while also coming up with the end in mind, while also not being able to create the end until I create the beginning and all of the middle stuff. And so this is almost a which came first, the chicken or the egg thing. But with God, he had both in mind at the exact same time, because he's incredible and God and sovereign and bigger than any of us can comprehend. So then we get to the question of, what would the beginning of creation, the Garden of Eden, and Adam and Eve and the fall and all of that look like in a crazy fantasy world with some fantasy concepts involved? So for this world, what my thought is, this world is going to have 7 tribes with 7 different powers, where everyone from each of the tribes has different powers. We've got one tribe that basically has super speed, one tribe that has basically super strength, one can shapeshift, one is like mental and has mind reading capabilities, and that kind of thing. And we'll get more into details, and there's a ton of specifics that I've started thinking through, and we'll kind of talk through on another video that is going to make this interesting and engaging. But point being, how do I explain the fact that each of these 7 tribes has different powers? And specifically, they all are born with crystals in their chests that give them these powers. And so what I was thinking was, we have a crystalline tree. So obviously, in the Garden of Eden, we have the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And so for the beginning of this world, this is what I jotted down. Let me know what you guys think. In the former age, before the turning of the heavens, before the twin fires burned in the sky, we'll explain that later, don't worry. Petrus was naught but shadow and desolation. The realm lay silent beneath the weight of the unseen void, a land without form, a world without time. The heavens were shut, the ground was dry, and no river flowed, for the breath of life had not yet been sent forth. And in that silence the wayward spirits reigned. 5 gods, twisted and fallen, took dominion over Petrus, lords of chaos, who wrought ruin upon the forsaken realm. And then I go into description of each of the 5, which we talked about last time. So check out the prior video from this, and you can learn more about what I'm thinking for those. But basically, these are the demons or the spiritual powers, the principalities and powers that are creating chaos over the world of Petrus. So skipping down some, we have, then the everlasting one beheld the ruin of his creation and was moved to compassion. He stretched forth his hand, and at the heart of the desolation he planted a single tree, whose roots reached deep, whose boughs reached high. And behold, the crystalline tree took root. Its trunk gleamed with fire, yet was harder than stone. Its branches were smooth and strong, and upon them its leaves shimmered as crystal, drinking from the unseen height. And within its heart, the everlasting one set 7 crystals, 1 at the center and 6 encircling it, each infused with his power to restore the land. Then the crystalline tree shook the foundations of Petrus. From its boughs a radiance poured forth, and a great sun was kindled in the sky, golden and unchallenged. And for the first time the world knew the turning of light and shadow, and the time was measured. And the barren land drank deeply from the fire of the Great One. And the earth awakened. The dry riverbeds swelled, and water coursed through the land. Then the everlasting one spoke forth to the earth, and green life surged forth. The dry plains were clothed in grasses, rolling and abundant, bending beneath the wind sent by the Maker's breath. The valleys, once cracked and dead, were adorned with trees of every kind, their roots drinking deeply from the rivers of life. And then I describe him creating some of the animals and the plants. And so for a time, all was as it was meant to be. The storms that had ruled Petrus for countless ages faltered. The dust was stilled, the winds were hushed, and for the first time light fell upon the ground, and the world was at rest. Thus was the first age begun. All right, so what do you think of that? Basically, we have the everlasting one, God, Adonai, casts down these wicked lowercase g gods or spiritual entities that are rebelling against him. God casts them down onto the world of Petrus, and chaos is reigning as they bring destruction on his world. And that happens for however long. And then God looks upon the world of Petrus, and he decides to bring life to it. And so he plants a single tree, the crystalline tree, and that brings life into the world. And within this tree have 7 crystals that contain a different set of power that brings life to the tree. And then obviously we'll get into what happens with that tree. All right. So then we have obviously these spiritual entities, these gods are like, oh no, we don't like light and life and happiness. We want to destroy that. How dare you bring that to our world? We want to be in control. And so they try to destroy the crystalline tree. And so God creates 2 humans, O and Assa, a man and a woman, and they are tasked with guarding the tree and tending to and nurturing the life on the world of Petrus. One thing I put down, but I'm not really sure if I'm going to do anything with, is they've got some cool armor and weapons that they'll use to guard the tree. And I'm like, oh, that sounds so cool. And then I just realized that I never did anything with it past this. One thing that is different between me and God, he does not drop the ball on plot point. So what do you guys think? What should I do with this cool armor and weaponry that the first man and woman have? Obviously, we'll see the fall and corruption and all of these things, but should we just leave it in history, or should I bring up that idea for maybe they discover, maybe future people, either somewhere in the history of this world in the Bible, or even in the series itself, what if they discover some of this armor or some of the weapons, and then they get to use it for something? I don't know. Just throwing out a thought that I may or may not do anything with. What do you think? Do you think that sounds like an engaging idea for a plot point or MacMuffin? Anyways, then God commands that Os and Assa are not to take the crystals out of the tree, but instead they're tasked with guarding it. So what I decided could be interesting is instead of having our Adam and Eve taking the crystals from the tree, since there are 7 crystals, and that being so because I want to have 7 tribes, my idea was, what if they have 7 children and then the children take the crystals? And so then technically our first Adam and Eve don't actually sin. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Is that pushing things in a direction we shouldn't be going? Or is that fine that we have the 7 children of our Adam and Eve figures taking the crystals out because they are the ones that end up being tempted by these demons? And so this was a really interesting challenge of, how do I explore the beginnings of this world and have it theologically sound and glorifying God, and throwing in some crazy fantasy elements with all of these powers and crystals and this tree and these demons and all the things. I think it turned out pretty good, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Because next time we're going to dive into the actual fall, where the demons tempt the kids, the 7 children of Os and Assa, and we end up seeing the unfortunate curses and fall of this world. But that also sets up everything else in the story. I've really enjoyed this process of coming up with what this world and what the history of this world is going to look like. And I hope that you guys have found me talking about it interesting. I hope it gives you guys some insights into how I write, how to world build, some theology insights maybe, because ultimately my point with this channel, but also with my books and my writing, is to glorify God, is to glorify our Creator, who reigns from the highest heavens, created all that we see around us, and ultimately is going to reign for all of eternity. That is the God that we serve, and that is the God that I want to honor with my writing and glorify even in story form, as I am creating my own fantasy world that hopefully points to him as well. And so let me know what you guys think. Do you guys have any ideas for what should happen next, or tweaks we should make to the beginning there? What do you think of the names Os and Assa? That's spelled A-U-S and A-U-S-A. I'm terrible with naming because I never know what to come up with for names. So I'd love to hear your thoughts if you have an idea of something better than that. Or maybe I could pronounce it weird, like Ayus and Ayusa. Which one do you guys think is better? All right, stay tuned, because next time we'll dive into what happens next in the story. See you guys then.